Good morning. We are reviewing the conclusion of Ayin Beis, volume 3, and we are on page 1449. Aleph Tov Mem Tes. Closer to the bottom of the page. And I say reviewing because we've learned this already once, a few years ago. It's already years. We learned it all the way to the conclusion, which goes all the way till page 1477. So another 30 pages approximately, a little less, 28 pages. However, because the Rebbe Rashab did not finish the Hemshech, writing it, so we found the Maimorim that this is based on. So questions that were left unanswered and themes that were left unfinished, we're able to extract from the Maimorim that this is based on, that he does quote directly. So going back, informed by that, and we learned that inside, especially the two Maimorim Hamagbi, or two Maimorim in Teira'era, a Maimer and its explanation, Teira'era Chanukah, and then a Maimer from the Mittler Rebbe, like a 70-page Maimer that we learned inside here in this class. And based on what we learned there, plus other material that we've been discussing, we're learning this again to broaden and see how we can figure out the puzzle of the general themes of Ayin Beis as they would have most likely continued had the Rebbe Rashab finished it, and as much as possible rebuild it, reimagine what it would have been like, especially firstly concluding the questions, as I said, and the themes that were not finished, but also bring it back to the central theme of Ayin Beis in general. So that's the process we're doing. I've also been writing an essay, which I've already written 4 parts of, that does the same thing in more succinct terms. I mean, here we're learning it more in depth, all the details, but there's more of a summary of the main the questions that the Rebbe Rashab did not answer, and as I said, the ideas, themes that he didn't finish. So you could also see that, and it has been posted on our group, ayinbeis.com, Ayin Beis WhatsApp group, as well as, you know what, we'll probably post it as well on ayinbeis.com, just that essay. So it's always available there as well. Because we do have on chassidussupply.com a section called ayinbeis.com, which has all the pages of Ayin Beis and other material and all the archives of the videos. So we'll post that there as well. Okay. With that said, where are we up to? So yesterday I called it, I think, CSS, the Cosmic Support Center. The Cosmic Support System. I called it CSS. I could also say Support Center, CSC, but okay, CSS, which includes, of course, the Malachim, the angels, but not just the angels, as well as the Avis, the Shvatim. We have Moshe Rabbeinu on the top of the pole. We have Yeshua, Yecheskel, the other Nevi'im, as he's been reviewing here pretty much in detail the last few pages. The last thing we're learning, in other words, what each one of them, what role they play in helping us do our avodah. Because we sure can use help, because we live in a dark world. As great as the neshama is, and as powerful resources it has, it's concealed and has to contend with a battle with an animal soul and with many dark and hostile forces of this world. The way the Alter Rebbe puts it in Tanya from Eitz Chaim, it's a world that is very a double, a quadruple darkness, filled with klippas, shells, and sitra achra, the other side, to the point that they cry out, Aniva Avsi Eid, the Shayim Gavrim, by the wicked prosper. And in general, it says, Reiv Maisim in this world are difficult. Now, of course, there's much beauty in this world as well. Excuse me. There's much beauty in this world as well. But our job is, of course, to transform this dark world into a dira b'tachtenim. And tachtenim, as the Alter Rebbe puts it in Tanya, tacht n'shein tacht l'mata mimenu. That's where he brings some of these expressions. There's no lower world than this, And yet here's where we create a dira, a home, a mishkan, for Atzmus. Not just for levels of the divine that are commensurate to existence, a malakalam or even seviv kalam, transcendent levels, but all the way for Atzmus itself. Basically, a dira where Atzmus is begoli. So Atzmus is always here, but it should be revealed on our terms in a way that the world itself experiences it. So in that process, we're given a big Seder Ishtalshalos with many, many, many resources. Every level in Seder Ishtalshalos is essentially a resource, essentially an instrument, a tool for us to use in our Avodah. And namely, as he said, talked about some of the so-called personalities in the Torah, as well as different kufas, different eras, different periods in time, each expressing a different level of revelation. And they're all within us, as I explained yesterday. So the last thing we've been learning was the difference between the Oves and the Shvatim, called in Kabbalah Merkava Elah, Merkava Elah, Merkava Tata. Merkava is simply in Aramaic, Merkava. The upper, the higher chariot, and the lower chariot. The higher chariot is in Atzilus, namely Malchus of Atzilus. That's the Oves, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. And the Shvatim, the children of Yaakov, are their brand. The next stage is Merkava Tata of Beriya, or Beriya. Sometimes Beriya, sometimes Beriya. And he explained what is the difference in Avodah. That was the last thing we learned. What's the difference between them and Avodah? In Haskalah, in concept, the difference is Yichud Elah and Yichud Tata. That the Oves transmit into the Neshamas the power of recognizing the total absolute, he called it Bittul Mitzias. He said, Eira Atzilus Mama, Eira Sof, Midei Bizgalim Benafshem, Gili Eira Sof Bechlal Benashamas Yisraelis Hadas VaKara Belakus Ki'ilu Roya. However, not every nefesh can contain that, so that's why we have the Shvatim, and that is essentially Yehuda Tata, Bitla Yesh. Actually, Yehudi Lo, Yehuda Tata used later in Aveda. Bitla Yesh, that there's an existence in Beriya that appreciates and recognizes, experiences godliness. In Aveda, these are the two levels that he called the Mesiras Nefesh of Hashem Echad, Shema, and Mesiras Nefesh of B'chol Nafshecho, where we also say, Afila Neitlas Nafshecho, even if they to take your life. So there's B'chol Levovecho, which is a lower level, there's B'chol Nafshecho. So he addresses here Hashem Echad and B'chol Nafshecho. What's the difference? So here's what we learned. Echad is Atzmos Ein Sof, that's higher than any form of Gilui. And that's the Oyer, as I explained, that's the experience, the expression, the awareness and consciousness of Oyer, of Atzmus, that the Oyer manifests because it's attached and connected to Atzmus, the sense that Hu Levade ve'ein zelase, him alone and nothing else, and nothing besides him. I said, even though he didn't say it explicitly, it sounds like a Mamayla Lamata experience. I'm not going to say that definitively, but very likely. But regardless, Kamay came ben Neshama, Shenigish ba Atzmus, and through that, it's a total sense of complete immersion or absorption, I would say. Like he says, Mesir says, Be'echad, Nizbatelas b'chinas Atzmus Ein Sof. Where the nefesh is completely consumed, completely overtaken, overwhelmed by this only true reality called Atzmus. So we're not talking about existence as in on the divine, as in bittul on the terms of existence. We're talking about bittul from the terms of Atzmus. Kudi law, he calls this. The neshama is connecting exactly as it was before it came down to this world. A very high level of bittul. He calls it the bittul of Antu Chad, says Tzemach Tzedek, of you are one beyond anything else, a singularity. What's B'chol Nafshecha? B'chol Nafshecha is already saying you have a nefesh, but you're giving your nefesh away. V'ahavtas Hashem l'kacha B'chol Nafshecha. And I'll soon explain the difference to B'chol Nafshecha and B'chol Levovecho. B'chol Nafshecha is his bonus, how everything in existence is completely a ha'ara, only a reflection, like basically insignificant, negligible compared to Atzmus. So here you're not talking about just the exclusivity of Atzmus on its own. We're talking about looking at the world and realizing this world that tempts us and seduces us and distracts us is nothing compared to Atzmus, compared to the Iteiz Baruch. Like this, like the light of the sun within the sun, he brings from Shayachad V'Amona. Hayesh batel betachlis. So we're talking about a yesh, but you're recognizing that this yesh, like what we learned earlier, mamata lamayla, when you go hamayrik be'echad, you begin with the yesh, existence. And you come to realize all of existence is coming from Dvar Hashem, the words of Hashem, which come from God's thoughts, from God's faculties, so to speak, attributes, all the way to the highest levels. That's why it sounds like it's mamata lamayla, the second one. Again, I'm not going to say definitively, and it's not so critical to the understanding of this regardless, but this is bitla yesh. And he then spells out from the Maimed Sener Rana that he quotes, not just that the soul is completely consumed and absorbed in Atzmus, but that the yesh itself senses its bittul, the kiyam eitzim einav mereyos bera, that it refrains in a very powerful way from looking at anything that's bad, that's evil, ubishmirosan, and protecting and refraining from negative thoughts, deliberate or inadvertent ones, that are not directed to God, and not to follow the heart's temptations. So here you see it's engaging with the yesh. This is a bittul mitzad koyach hachachma. I said maybe that's the level that he speaks about in Tanya chapter 18, 19. Maybe it's a form of kfir bepeil lichbish kodet seinesav, that you're conquering kfir. You are overpowering all those desires for materialism and everything in this physical world, and you're giving it away b'chol nafshecho with a mesiras nefesh, a fila netel. Mesiras nefesh liyes shezeu abitl b'chinas hanochas atzmusei. So think of it like, let's say, a soldier who's decided to join the military. So he has a yesh, he has an identity, he has an ego, but he's committed. He's totally committed to be part of the military and does what he's told to do. Whereas the first Mesiras level of Mesiras Nefesh is completely bittul mitzias in Atzmus itself. Now, how is this different than V'ahavta b'chol levavcha? Says the Friedrich Rebbe Rashab like this. It's higher than b'chol levavcha, because b'chol levavcha comes first. V'ahavta Hashem lekech with all your heart. So that's bittul hayesh, but you don't have the element of neitlas nafshecha. You're not saying you're giving your soul away, you're giving your heart away. Or you're directing your heart toward loving God. So it's bittul hayesh, but not mesiras nefesh. And he explained this is more of a hezbanus hapitam v'das, where you contemplate on the importance of godliness, obviously, and you compel yourself that it's like more of I use the word temporary, I think, not permanent. He doesn't say those words, mamish, but he says it's a ava asuya, meaning it's a love that is manufactured because you're determined that you should be committed. So it is a avos Hashem, of course, b'chol levavcha, but it's not with, we don't call it mesiras nefesh. Mesiras nefesh means mesiras haratzon, with a total commitment and total dedication, which is still lower than Hashem Echad. And as I said, he's very brief here. If anybody wants more on this, I would suggest going to the Erech in Sefer Erechim, Chabad, the Encyclopedia Chassidus. There's a whole Erech, a long Erech called V'ahavta, as Avos Hashem, V'ahavta Hashem l'kecha b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meidecha. Explains all the different ways you understand these three levels of love. Here he's talking about b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha here, and b'chol nafshecha in contrast to Hashem Echad. Okay. Mashenka b'chol nafshecha b'chinas mesiras nefesh, mesiras haratzon. And this is what the Shvatim are mamshech to us. So each one of us comes from the Shvatim, comes from a Shevet, from one tribe, So the Ovis are Mamshech Yichudei Lo. And the Shvatim Yichudei Tato, again, he doesn't use the word Yichudei Tato, at least not till here, but Beit Bitla Hayesh. And I explained yesterday how we need both because it's different levels of support. Just like you have a Rebbe, and you have a teacher, and you have a Mashpia, and you have different levels of people who help you, a friend, and so on. So we have all these forces and resources within us. And that's where we stop.
Shvatim is b'chol
I'm going to
nafshecho,
continue
right?
to read now from the line, V'yesh Shleimer, she's gamkin hefresh ben hashpa. I'm sorry, what are you asking?
Shvatim is b'chol nafshecho, not b'chol levovecho.
Correct. And Ovis is Hashem Echad in this context here. So
Is
the line
Yeshua
begins.
higher than the Shvatim?
I'm sorry?
Yeshua is higher than the Shvatim?
You have to figure it out. It doesn't say it explicitly here. He says Yeshua is lower than the Beis HaMikdash. He said the Oves are between the Nevi'im and Moshe. The Shvatim, he compared the Shvatim to the Malachim, and he said the Shvatim are actually higher than the Malachim. He said that at the bottom. Where did he say that? I remember he said that at close to the top. Yeah. Not sure. It's not so clear. It doesn't say here explicitly which one. We know Yeshua is also in Beriya, and he needs the Malach, the Matat. The Shvatim, it says, are higher than the Malach. So it's mashma, it's a little higher probably, but doesn't say it explicitly. I mean, they're both levels of bringing a lukus. The only thing is Yeshua comes after Matan Torah. So there's a certain mile that he has the Shvatim don't have. They came before Matan Torah. Yeah, it's hard to say exactly. Fine. So continuing on here. So the line begins, Hashvatim, we're talking 3, 6, 9 lines from the bottom of the paragraph, page 1449. Yes, it says now, like this. V'yesh Leimer, sheyesh gam kein hefresh bein hashpa shayidei Merkava of Beriya and Yetzira. That there's also a difference between the Merkava, the hashpa that comes from the Merkava of Beriya and Yetzira. You remember the Merkava of Yecheskel, he called Merkava of Yetzira. But the Shvatim, we call Merkavta Tata, Merkava of Beriya. The Ovis is the Merkava of Malchus of Atzilus. So he says there's also a difference in the Ashpa between Merkava of Beriya and Yetzira. And let's see what he says. Shari Beriya hu levush ha'Atzilus. Because Beriya, coming after Atzilus, is considered like a garment to Atzilus. We learned this earlier as well. We spoke about that the Shvatim was a chibur of Beriya to Atzilus. That's why they're called a Merkava. That's why they're higher than Malachim, he called them. Shari Merkava, the Shvatim before is so. But basically, Beriya is a levush to Atzilus. So it makes it closer to Atzilus. Valkein al-idea Merkava de Beriya hu ha'ava de b'chol nafshecha. That's why the Merkava of Beriya, which is the level of the Shvatim, Merkavta Tata, is the Ava b'chol nafshecha. Va'idei Merkava de Yetzira. Now he spells it out. Hu ha'ava de b'chol levovecho. That's the love of b'chol levovecho. So now he's associating that with now the levels of Merkava as well. Without saying as much, but before, when we learned the Merkava of Yetzira, which was Yecheskel, so that looks like Yecheskel is connected in Aveda to B'chol Levovecho. Doesn't say it explicitly, so I want to be careful. Maybe he doesn't mean that. But regardless, the difference in Beriya Yetzira is now comparing to B'chol Nafshecho and B'chol Levovecho. Ubederech Klal, and in general, this is quite brief and not elaborate, and I'm not going to elaborate a lot on this either, because the idea is clear. And this is not the place he wants to necessarily go into explaining all the levels of neshamas. So even if it's intriguing, I'm sure some of you would like to have more details. So here's where I would say do some research, look up indexes, go to Sefer Likutim, Sefer Erchim, as I mentioned, and you can find a lot more if you're interested in digging deeper into these differences. Here he's just establishing these levels because the Rebbe Rashab is being thorough and wants to just explain. So he says, B'derech klal, what is the difference between these two levels in the shamas? Who are hefresh bein the shamas da Atzilus, le neshamas de Beriya. So the Ovis, we said, was Atzilus. The Shvatim is in Beriya. Also, Merkava of Yetzira is Yetzira. So he says there's a difference between these two levels of neshamas. So till now he's been talking about where we're getting the hashpah from. Is it coming from the Ovis within us or from the Shvatim within us? Now he's saying this also associates to actually two different levels of soul. Shehem b'china zera adam v'zera behema. Again, this is very brief. I'll explain, of course, what these words mean, but there's a lot on this in many places. One place is the Hachedesh Hazeh, famous Maimon Samach Vav, where he talks about this, that the difference between Zera Adam and Zera Behema, it's just two expressions in the Psukim, but the Zohar and Kabbalah and Chassidus discuss them in context of two levels of souls. Zera Adam literally means the seed of a man. Zera Behema means the seed of an animal. Now we know, we're not talking about, God forbid, that a human being is being compared to an animal. But just like Shem Ban, right? It's a name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Ban is Yud Kei Vav Kei b'mili Heyin, so it adds up to 52, which is Ban, Gematria Behema. So we learned earlier, why is it called Behema? He discussed it. He said, because not Behema in the context like an animal that we would refer to inferior to human. Because it has the elements of more concealment than Ma, the Shem Ma, which is Gematria Adam. We learned this earlier, I don't know, around 20 pages back. I can look it up where exactly. But he spoke about it in more detail. When he spoke about levels of neshamas. Let me see if I can find it quickly. If I can, it's worth looking at. Let's see here. Talked about, where was it? Okay.
1434.
What do you find?
I think it's on 1434 on the fifth line from the top. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe. No,
that's not. No,
that's not it. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, that's all right. It's all right. It's, I think, earlier a bit.
Yeah.
Let me think a second. What was the context? The context was, I think, Ruach HaAdam, Ruach HaBehema. Yeah, he was talking about how the neshama, when it comes down below, the Ruach HaAdam Elu L'mayla and the Ruach HaBehema Yeredes Lamata. That was the context. I think it was about Malchus, if I recall correctly. If you want to look at those words. Ruach HaAdam Elu L'mayla, Ruach.
Yeah, good. Wow, you're incredible. 1437.
Okay, there you go.
It's in the middle of the page, about 15 lines from the bottom of the paragraph.
Okay, yeah, that's it right there. Yeah, good.
Sorry, Rabbi.
Yeah, that's it. There we go. Yeah, exactly. What was the context there? Oh, Shechina. It was in the levels of Shechina. Yeah, okay. So explain the Gematria Behema. Yeah, exactly. So my point is that when you say Neshama Zera Behema, it's not meant to be the meaning. It's just Beriya compared to Atzilus is like a Behema compared to an Adam, the level of Bittul. So two levels of Neshama. The Neshama is the Zera Adam. We talk about Neshamas of Zera Adam. Mekablim Mebchinas Merkava Beriya. They receive from the higher Merkava, the Ovis, Hein Merkava. From the Ovis, from the patriarchs who are called the Merkava. The Neshamas, the Zera Behema, and the lower level of Neshamas of Beriya, Mekablim Merkava Tata, they receive from the lower Merkava, the Hashvatim, the Hamalachim. He bundles them together here. The Shvatim Malachim, because in general they're both Merkava, even though he did distinguish and say Shvatim are a level higher than the Malachim. within that lower Merkava. But here he makes it very clear that the Malachim are included in that. So again, he doesn't explain it, he just associates it, places it. We have a location now of two levels of neshamas, which generally speaking, the neshamas of Atzilus is reserved usually for tzaddikim, like he says here, the oves and others, and neshamas the biyah, as most of the rest of us is neshamas of biyah. Now, just for the record, all neshamas and neshamas and nesata b'ta'eri are rooted in Atzilus and even higher, to the highest levels. But we assume the properties of biyah. Whereas, let's say, neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu says, as he was in Atzilus, that's how he spoke to Parei in Erves Haaretz in Mitzrayim. So, like like an express train, I often refer to, like B'derech Maiver. He also went through biyah, but he's passing through, not assuming its properties. Just briefly, the difference in Islapshus and Maiver. And then the parentheses, the last parentheses in this paragraph, Umamela Muvan. And therefore, it's naturally understood from this, and it's basically a natural conclusion, the Etzem HaNeshama, the Bekulam Ubchinas Atzilus. Actually, he just said what I just said. He's saying what I just said, so he's qualifying. So I said it, I didn't realize that Rebbe Rashab is going to say it. Mela moving the Etzem HaNeshama, the core soul, is everyone is from Atzilus. Shazeh Inyan Teherihi. That's Teheri. Neshama Shenasata be Teherihi. We all say that. Every neshama says that. So how do you mekabels mibchinas markavte ilah? That's the acronym. So in other words, it's Mamela moving. He's saying that that's the neshama of everybody receives from the others. Like I explained, it's not like if you're receiving from the shvatim, you're not receiving from the others. It's only we have an additional resource called the shvatim to relate to us, to bring it down to our level. Okay, so he's now digressing a bit. I don't know whether this is what he was writing. Maybe it was around Rosh Hashanah time, and had these Maimorim been developed into at this part, which was Lei Nemar, this part of the Hemshech was not spoken, was not delivered. Maybe the Rebbe Rashab was already setting the stage that if he had actually broken it down to Maimorim, this may have been a Maimer connected to Rosh Hashanah and the Teshuva Teshuva. That's very possible. We find that earlier, obviously, but I don't want to say anything definitively. But he's suddenly speaking about the Teshuva, so you have to say that either he was writing it during that time, because that didn't just come out of nowhere. I mean, obviously it's connected to the idea, but it's possible he was writing it during that time, or as I said, maybe it was even a mimer that had he delivered it, it would have been interesting to know. This sounds like Ayin Ches, because he already recited a mimer from Ayin Ches. So maybe it's in that period of time, maybe even later. You know what? I'm going to actually look at the Maimarim from that period, Tafresh Ayin Ches, Tafresh Ayin Tes, the Seres Mitzvah Maimarim, to see if there's any hint to these topics there. That would just help maybe place this. Just thinking out loud here. No, it's not critical in understanding, but just thinking out loud. So he says, the Zayin Behimotzei. So that what is that referring to? The Pasuk says, Dirshu Hashem Behimotzei, beseech God, or call out to God when he's to be found. Karu b'yesei karev. Call to him when he's close. So of course the question is asked, what do you mean? God is always to be found. He's always close. Says the Gemara that it's referring to Aseres Simei Tshuva. Aseres Simei Tshuva, as Chassidus explains, the spark of the neshama is closer to its source, like think of an orbit. So there's a certain feeling that every neshama has during Aseres Simei Tshuva, like the Arizal says, that a person who doesn't cry in the 10 days of Tshuva, their neshama is not complete, because a neshama is closer, it's the kiruv hamoyer el anitzutz is the expression. It's like the source of the mother flame is closer to the baby flame. So as they come closer, they're drawn to each other. And that's what affects tshuva and the person's yearnings and longings, and so-called more sedus, more inspiration during that period of the year. So he's saying that's behimotzei. The baseres metshuva hu motzei afilu liyachid. So the Gemara says like this: that all year round you need a minyan to have the same level of connection. Whereas in Aseres Metshuva, what a minyan accomplishes, a quorum, During the year, an Aseret Tshuva, a Yochid. That's why it says, Dirsha Hashem b'motzei, that even a Yochid, an individual. Now, obviously, a minyan Aseret Tshuva is even higher than that. So, afilu Yochid, Hainu, and Chassidus Taitz's Yochid could also mean Yochid as in Yechida. Hainu she'oz meir mebchinas markavtei law. Shelo ya'idei hamalachim. So now he's telling us that even in the time of Golus, and even in the time when we are generally in need of the siyua, the support of the angels, there's a time of the year where you have more access directly to the source. And that's says Metshuva, even a Yochid, which is, because then is radiating Markavtei law of the Ovis, of Atzilus, without Malachim. Malachim is already Markavtei Tato. Valkein hu b'neshama gili b'chinas etzem neshama. And that's why in the neshama, that time of the year is the gili of etzem neshama. Obviously, that only grows as it comes to Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur itself, of course, in the Eilah, the end of Yom Kippur. But in general, that time of the year, between the Aseret Tshuva, Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, has this higher level of revelation. So now we see also during the, as I mentioned in previous classes, these levels are also existent throughout the year. I mean, if you really break it down, you could distinguish between the weekdays and Shabbos. Between Yom Tov, Aseret Tshuva, Yom Kippur, Purim. That's what a Yom Tov is. A Yom Tov means there's less filters and less layers that conceal the divine revelation. So not only Tkufas in history, not only the periods in history, it's also in our basically calendar. Different times of the year has different levels of revelation. We're in month of Adar, for example. Mishanichnas Adar, Marbin B'Simcha. The whole month of Adar is more conducive to joy. The contrast to that is Mishanichnas of Mamaytim B'Simcha. For the reasons, because destruction of the temple, more concealment, etc. But the point being is that there are the different shifts, and that's what he's adding here. So bottom line, what we learned here is, number one, there's two levels of neshamas. They receive from these two levels of Markavtei law, Markavtei tata. And the parenthesis he adds, Mamela moving, that it's a neshama for all Eden. All neshamas connect to that level. But, however, like we learned, not everybody can contain it. That's why we need the Shvatim to draw it down even closer. It's like, not, but then there's a time of the year, B'Motzei, that even a Yachid accesses that level as well. All of Fiyarach, obviously someone, a neshama of Atzilus in Aseret Tshuva is higher than a neshama of Beriya in Aseret Tshuva. That goes without saying, but I'm saying it anyway, just to make sure it's clear. Okay, so that concludes this paragraph, and also you'll see somewhat of a subsection of this whole discussion of the levels. And it's going to take us back now to the concept of, in general, Malachim, more details about what we started. And he started talking about Malachim in Golus, which really began on page 1444. But the general topic, just for the record, began a long time back. The Maimon Yosef Avenu, where did he really begin talking about Malachim, was on page 1408, if you want to keep track of this, of structure. That's where he really started talking about the Malachim in general. Yeah, before that was Teda and Neshamas. I always like to go back to get my coordinates, make sure I have the flow going. Good. Any questions before we continue? Sorry?
We are getting help from the Malachim, from the
You're going in and out. It's hard to hear. Hard to hear. Rab Shlomo, it's hard to hear you.
During the time of the Golus, even Yecheskel. Oh.
Can you repeat your question? I couldn't hear it.
Could you hear me now? 1 second. That means, you hear me now?
Yeah.
That means that we are getting the help from the Malachim, the Ovaries, the Shvatim, and even the Revim, and even Yecheskel and Zechariah.
Absolutely. And Moshe and Yeshua.
Okay. That's very interesting.
Doesn't I mean, I think he threw a lot in there all in one sentence. I mean, the
Yesterday, I
malacha,
gave a whole class, half my class was on that topic. I gave a whole example. In your lifetime, how many people have had influence on you that has been part of your support system? You have parents, you have siblings, you have friends, you have educators, different types of educators. You have mashpim, you have rabbonim, you have a rebbe, right there. Everybody in life has many levels of support, hopefully, and the more the merrier, frankly. So why is it a surprise? I mean, you learn Chassidus. There's a Moshe within us. There's the Ovis within us. There's the Shvatim within us. All these personalities in Torah are not just historic personalities. They're archetypes. We have Adam Arishon in us. We have Noach within us. We have a Bilam within us. We have Amalek within us. Everything that we have Yaakov and Esav within us. This is not, I'm sure it's not a surprise to anyone. You've heard this, no? I mean, all the Sikhs talk about this, how every story and every narrative, every personality is within us, even the negative ones. Everything is a lesson in our lives because each of these levels is another level of Seder Shtalshus, and all of Seder Shtalshus is within you. Just like you have Chesed within you, Gvura within you, Tiferes within you. So you have Beriya within you, Yetzira within you. Yeah.
But the Rebbe is like the navigator of everything. It's in a different category.
But it's long before the Rebbe. This is pure, this is, to me, Kol HaTeira is this. This is the whole Torah is that we learn about all these individuals, not just, Torah is not a history book. Torah is a blueprint for life. So every detail in Torah God used to create Stakel Baraisa or Bara Alma. So everything in Torah God looked at and created the world, including us. So when we're created in the divine image, we have all these aspects within us.
Yeah, but Moshe Rabbeinu, he's
So the whole
tafkid
Perek in Tanya, Perek Mem Beis, Moshe Shebechol Echad Ve'echad. That's why Milsa Zutra Sihi.
right, but Moshe
But what?
himself is like the Memutza
We
HaMechaber.
didn't
He's
say
a
we are Moshe. We have a Moshe within us. We're not the Ovis either. We're never going to be Avram, Yitzchak, Yankov, but we have well, first of all, we have their DNA, and we have all the ashpahs from them. That's the whole point. Chesed from Avram is Nimshach in us, and Chesed in us. It's the first time you heard this concept?
no, but Moshe, we always know that Moshe is the one which is the navigator.
Listen, and Avram, Echad Haya Avram. Avram is also unique. We're not Avram. We have Avram within us. And we have a Moshe within us.
Right, but we know that.
Anyway, there's many
the
sikhs.
Rebbe,
You can look it up and see the difference between Avram within us and Avram himself. The difference between the Moshe within us and Moshe himself.
I thought where Rav Shlomo was headed was he started talking about the Rebbe and whether or not that was somehow distinguishable and unique. Like not everybody had a Rebbe within them. I thought that's what his question was, but maybe I'm misunderstood his question.
I don't know.
no, I understand the Rebbe.
Okay.
We know the Rebbe is the one that is connecting us to the Eibusher. Of course, we have.
What does it
all
have to
these
do with
things.
what we're talking about here? Anyway, let's stick to Ayin Beis. If you have questions on this, I don't want to go off now, the reservation. There's a lot to talk about. Let's stick to what we're learning here. Basically, it comes down to, he explained different levels of revelation, the different individuals, different periods in history, Bais Rishon, Golus, Moshe, Yeshua, and all of them apply to our lives because they all give us strength and resources. And that's the bottom line, what he's saying here. That's all he's really saying. Not
It
going
is
into discussing the difference between Moshe himself and the Moshe within us, so let's just move on. Unless you have a very I mean, I don't want to elaborate more on this because it's really a distraction from what we're learning here. And if you want more, as I said, I gave you sources. Look it up. There's plenty of svarim, there's sikhs, maimorim that talk about it.
But just to close, the Rebbe is on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, right?
It says there's a Moshe in every generation. So
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
yeah, but that's also not part of this Ayin Beis. That's a general question.
No, I understand. This is Rabbi Teichel brought it up. I'm just curious. Sorry.
Okay. Next paragraph. V'kol zeh. All this that we've been discussing, shashpa ben neshamas, that the hashpa, the transmission to the souls, who al yidei mutzoyim, are through these different interfaces or intermediaries, the shvatim or malachim. He obviously means all the levels, but he's referring to specifically the last thing we learned was the tribes or the angels. Hulu. He nuzeu b'neshama melubeshes beguf. This is in regard to the neshama as it manifests in the body. Being that the neshama comes down below, manifests inside of a body, where it gets concealed and affected by the world below. So therefore, we need support to help us deal with that. We'll soon speak about the neshama before it's melubeshes beguf. Now, before he said, if you recall, when he started about malachim, he said the time of Golus, that neshamas mekablim ha'av v'yira shelahem aydei malachim zman ha'Golus, shemekablim neshamas ha'adei mutzayim. Here he's speaking about melubeshes beguf, which is really more than just Golus. In general, as soon as the soul comes down below, it needs this support. But obviously, it's only intensified in time of Golus. So I'm just qualifying that. Lies. Lies beslapshus zeis. Why does it need this support? Being. Because due to this manifestation of the soul inside the body, being enclosed in it, Yorda b'madreigasa, the soul has, as a result of that, the soul has descended and been lowered from its initial natural level, v'nisalam b'ha'ir, and within it gets concealed its powerful energy. Doesn't say powerful, it's the energy. So neshama without a guf, as it is without any of the partitions, or basically without any of the filters of the body, it's one thing. But since the neshama has come down inside of a body, and it's been lowered, and it's been concealed, al kain tzricha, that's why it needs lekabel hashpa lekis, b'yiseidus aviyir al yidei malachim. That's why it needs to receive its divine hashpa transmission through the hiseidus aviyira, through the stimulation of the love and reverence of the malachim. Like we said before Shema, we say Beriya and Yetzira, because the malachim, when they sing praise to God and express their love and reverence, they in turn are being mamshech to us, like we learned earlier, both to the animal soul as well as to the divine soul. This hashpah. Here he's talking in general, including the divine soul. Malach Machol, he said Ava. Malach Gavriel, from Malach Gavriel comes Yira, reverence. Okay. So this is going back now to the cosmic support system that are the angels, which was a central theme that we've been learning throughout here in the last, they said really last 40 pages, with different, obviously, sections and somewhat different branches, branching off to different themes, but ultimately it's coming back to that. However, an important thing he's going to qualify, that's only a support system. Like I said with the digestive system doesn't feed us. The food feeds us. You need food. The digestive system processes the food. It's a support system. Support system is not the source. Besides the fact that they're working as God's messengers and agents and ambassadors, ministers, whatever you want to call them, besides that, they are only a support system. They're not, like he's going to say, v'gam zeh. And also this support that they're offering is only b'derech siyur. It's only like an additional help. Next page, 1450. Shari neshama be'etzem. We're not saying the neshama does not have all these resources. And neshama be'etzem yesh ba midas ha'ava vayira. The neshama is not receiving love and reverence. We know neshama has 10 faculties, Eser Keiches HaNefesh, that do not come from the Malachim. And the Neshama is born with them. They actually are evolved from the 10 spheres. So it has Chesed and Gvur, it has Ava V'Yira. V'gam yesh bo hasogya l'kish be'etzem. And the Neshama also has, fundamentally at the core, an understanding, a comprehension, a divine comprehension. It's not like you're talking about an entity that doesn't have any of these resources. It has these resources. The problem is that it's concealed and it's hard to access, as we see when the neshama comes down below. So the malachim, just like a teacher doesn't give you seichel. You're born with seichel. As much as God forbid, if a person didn't have any intelligence in their brain, they had no brain, the teacher couldn't do anything. Once you have a brain with all this potential and capacity, you may even have a mind that's even greater than your teacher's. But the teacher can then convey an idea, can train you. And then you grow, and you could even, as I said, reach the teacher's level, Adar Boyin Shnin, 40 years, or even surpass. Just as an example. Actually, like I just said, and this divine comprehension and the love and reverence of neshamas, if we talk about pure firepower, the neshama's comprehension and neshama's love and reverence is higher than the meichin and midas, than the cognitive and emotional faculties of the malachim. Like we learned earlier, that the neshamas come from pnimius, from the inner, and malachim come from chitzenius. This we learned back on page 1408, as well as a few places. 1408 for sure. Well, 1408, 1409, 1410. But the main place that I'd like to refer you to, where we learned that, was a few pages later. Let's see. Yeah, on page 14. That's a homo mei. There was one place I wanted to specifically refer to. Yeah, here we go. Page 1434 and 1435. There it was more elaborate, where he literally explained how neshamas come from pnimius and malachim from chitzenis. He actually said malachim can only say ayem came kvede. Where are you? And the neshamas are called kodesh because they themselves are the level of Hashem's kedusha. Kadeshim tiyu. It's on page 1434, 1435. And then he asked the question: since neshamas are so higher than malachim, why do they need malachim? He asked that question at the bottom of page 1443, and his answer was because it comes down below in a nefesh habamis and a guf, and that's why it needs. So this is all consistent. So he's saying, but the neshama itself is higher than malachim. However, malachim are sublime, are ethereal, are spiritual. The neshama is bo bakshama. And neshamas come into a physical entity. Malachim never become physical. They can take on the shape of a physical a person, like we see the malachim that came to Avram, but they don't actually become neshamas begufim. Al kain sirichim siyua, because not inside etzem neshama. Etzem neshama would not need any support from anything, like we learned about etzem koyach hariyah. The etzem koyach hariyah does not need a light to see in the dark. But once the power of vision comes into the physical eye, like the neshama coming into a guf, the physical eye conceals. And therefore you need an outside light to see in the dark. But who sees? The eye sees. That's why we need siyua. That's the word. The support and the help of the malachim, so to speak, to help awaken, if you wish, or help ignite, help fan the flames of the neshama on its own. And then when you do that, obviously the neshama will surpass the malachim, surpass even Torah, surpass all the Einei Ha'eda, and we'll reach all the way into the etzem, as we'll learn soon, and we have learned. But now we're talking about how neshama, like he says, once it's melubeshes beguf, that's where it needs the siyua, and it's only a siyua. It's not giving it its fundamental powers. It's a support that is helping it access and helping develop and cultivate its strengths and powers. And we'll stop here, because now he's going to go even further to talk about now neshamas and malachim, where you have on one hand what the neshamas have, on the other hand what the malachim accomplish. So this is very clear that malachim are not superior to neshamas, but they do play a support. Just like as I said, the Rabbeim had teachers as well, and that trained them, that taught them Ayin Beis, that taught them the basics, and then they obviously surpassed them. So we all need siyua in this world when a neshama comes down below and begins his journey, as we've been learning. So I'll stop here by this 5 lines, top of page 1450, and any questions? We have 27 more pages till the end of the Hemshech. And we have 13 more pages till he gets back to Magbi. Just laying it out. Okay, so let's stop here. I guess there's no questions. Okay.
Sure.